Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, to the induction ceremony for the Texas Appellate Section Hall of Fame. And we are honoring our 2023 inductees today. I'm very, very pleased to serve as MC for this wonderful event that honors Texas's best appellate practitioners and jurists. And I first have to take a moment to thank Jackie Stroh, who put this presentation together. She's the chair of the Hall of Fame committee. And she would be here in my stead, but for an unavoidable conflict, not similar to what Lisa Hobbs is experiencing, but she couldn't be here either. So as Dylan said, it's our 13th year. The Texas Appellate Hall of Fame was created in 2011 by the Appellate Section of the State Bar and also by the Texas Supreme Court Historical Society. And it recognizes and honors judges and appellate practitioners who've made very unique contributions to the practice of appellate law in Texas. And this year's inductees, as every year, they're selected by a board of trustees. This year, that board of trustees consisted of the chair of the appellate section, Lisa Hobbs, the president of the Historical Society, Rich Phillips, and other appellate lawyers throughout the state. The trustees had a number of wonderful nominees to choose from. It's always a difficult choice. They voted on a slate of nominees and selected 3 individuals for induction into the Texas Hall of Fame for 2023. And those inductees are Judge Fortunato Pete Benavides, Justice Richard Dick Countess, and Professor Leonard Wayne Scott. And these inductees are selected based on their written and oral advocacy, their professionalism, faithful service to the citizens of Texas, mentorship of new appellate attorneys and other attorneys, their pro bono service, participation in CLE, and many other indicia of excellence in the practice of appellate law and also the enhancement of our profession. Each of these 3 inductees was instrumental in advancing civil appellate practice in Texas. In this group, we have judges who had distinguished and significant tenures with both the state and the federal judiciary. And we have a longtime law professor who is devoted to civil appellate law as a specialty practice, even back before that was cool. Among their many, many accomplishments are service at various levels of the judiciary, the authoring thousands of appellate opinions, working as a district attorney, volunteering on law-related committees and commissions, teaching at law schools throughout Texas, spearheading efforts to recognize civil appellate practice as a board-certified practice, coaching moot court teams and judging those competitions, publishing books, participating in CLE presentations, and on and on and on. And they were Texas pioneers in other ways as well, establishing a Center for Troubled Teens, serving in the military, creating an alternative dispute resolution center. So these 3 inductees are inspiring examples of the positive and lasting mark that one person, in this case 3 people, can make on appellate practice in Texas. And before we invite the first speaker to the stage, I would like to express all of our gratitude to the many family members and friends of the inductees who are in attendance today representing these inductees. And would you all please stand as a group to be recognized? We're so thankful you all could make it. It really means a lot to us to be able to present this award to your family members. And first, to speak on behalf of Judge Fortunato Benavides is Chief Judge Priscilla Richmond. And she served with Judge Benavides on the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Please welcome Chief Judge Richmond.
Good afternoon. As a friend and a colleague of Judge Fortunato Pete Benavides for many years, I am happy but humbled to participate in honoring him today. Judge Benavides served on the Fifth Circuit for more than 25 years until his health prevented him from participating in the work of the court. But before I talk about his professional life and service as a judge, I want to share just a few things about the person that we all knew and loved. Ask anybody on the Fifth Circuit, and they will tell you that Pete was a beloved member of the court. His sense of humor was large and delightful. He was also a gifted teller of stories, and they were all true. Pete had such a rich history and a very large family that had a rich history as well. And he always was fond of sharing his recollections and experience with us over the years about his upbringing in South Texas, his exploits in the political realm, and the rich path that his life had uniquely taken. The common denominator in his storytelling was his love for people. He loved people from all walks of life. And he had the ability to see not just the humor, but also the pathos when he shared his encounters in his life with us. Judge Benavides was born in Mission, Texas, which is in the lower Rio Grande Valley. He was the second youngest of 7 children. I think that's right. And he grew up in the adjacent town of McAllen. Pete was a family man throughout his life. The love of his life was Evie, and he was extremely proud of and doted on his 2 very talented daughters. Pete counted as friends many people in Texas who were in the entertainment business, including Willie Nelson. He was an avid golfer, and he had a close and large circle of golfing buddies that sometimes included the clerk of our court, Lyle Casey. He was well loved by generations of law clerks, not just his own. Judge Benavides thoroughly enjoyed socializing with everyone's law clerks after dinner in New Orleans, and they thoroughly enjoyed socializing with him. I remember one morning one of my law clerks came in, and I looked at her. I said, "How late were you out?" She just shook her head. I think it was something after midnight. In a word, Pete Benavides lived life to the fullest. But notwithstanding his true gusto for life, he was a serious, thoughtful lawyer and jurist. He received his undergraduate degree from the University of Houston, and then later his law degree also from the University of Houston Law Center in 1972. He began his judicial career as a county court at law judge in Texas. He would ultimately become a judge on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. As he was serving on that court, he was required to run for election in a statewide race. And sadly, he did not prevail in that election. But the state's system's loss was certainly the federal system's gain. In 1994, Judge Benavides was appointed by President Clinton to serve as a judge on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Pete proved to be not only an excellent questioner from the bench, and sometimes an entertaining one, and he was a gifted opinion writer. He was well respected and loved for the relationships he forged with all of his colleagues. We all liked to go out to dinner with Pete, but more importantly, we all listened intently to what he had to say when we were discussing cases around the post-submission conference table, and because he always had substantive observations and comments to share. He often had a unique perspective to share with us. His diverse interests and large circle of friends certainly enriched his life, including his service as a judge. Judge Benavides wrote more than 2,000 opinions while on the Fifth Circuit and more than 500 opinions as a state judge. His work has withstood the test of time. I'm sorry, I'm tongue-tied this morning. His work is well regarded and respected. We lost Judge Benavides this past spring when he passed from this life. I speak for the entire court in expressing how much we respected and now how much we miss Judge Benavides. Thank you for honoring our friend and colleague by inducting him into the Texas Appellate Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Next is certainly a friend of this section. Lynn Liberato is going to speak on behalf of Justice Richard Dick Countess. Lynn has argued before Justice Countess. She was his appellate opponent and then ultimately became his friend. Please welcome Lynn Liberato.
Well, from the time he was a little guy, Dick Countess knew he did not want to be a farmer like his parents. So he assessed his skills this way. I could talk all day, I kind of enjoyed drama, and I was in some school plays. So he determined he had the skills to be a lawyer, and in high school in Midland, he set his path. On that path, he accomplished just about everything a lawyer could accomplish. He was editor-in-chief of the SMU Law Review. He was selected for the U.S. Justice Department Honor Graduate Program in Washington, D.C. He was a trial and appellate lawyer at fine firms, including his own. And get this, he was an elected district attorney twice in two districts that were 650 miles apart and 36 years apart. He was a district judge in Spearman, Texas, and an appellate judge on the Amarillo Court of Appeals. He chaired the judicial section of the state bar, and he was a civil procedure instructor at SMU and U of H Law School. And that's just a start. Now, significantly to this crowd, and I was struck whenever Heidi mentioned that there were appellate lawyers before appellate lawyers were cool. He was way ahead of his time on that. In the early 1960s, Dick Countess practiced as an appellate lawyer. From the start of his career, he said he wanted to be an appellate lawyer, and remarkably, his first law job was as an appellate lawyer in the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. Well, with so many achievements to choose from, what might Justice Countess suggest we highlight about him? Well, I'm going to give it a shot. At the Justice Department in the early 60s, he fought alongside Bobby Kennedy against Governor George Wallace to integrate the University of Alabama. He was a proud yellow dog Democrat. He was appointed to the Amarillo Court of Appeals bench by Republican Governor Bill Clements, even though he would not agree to run for election as a Republican, and credit to Governor Clements for that too. And he loved being a judge. But more than anything, he loved his family. He moved to Spearman from D.C. because of his family. He joined and left the bench because of his family. He and Karen spent 23 years hosting family gatherings at their home on Lake Livingston, where he would hold court. Of Karen, who is here, his wife of 64 years, he said, "She was my rock. She supports me. She helps me," adding with a smile, "sometimes more than I want." Most of the husbands out there can understand that. Of his daughter, he proudly recounted how as a little girl, she would introduce herself to other judges at judicial receptions. "I am Julie Countess, Judge Countess's daughter." Then in a 2016 interview, he said he looked forward to being able to introduce himself as follows: "I am Dick Countess, Judge Julie Countess's father." Well, he lived to swear her in as a justice on the Houston First Court of Appeals in 2060, and I know he'd be so proud. He is so proud. Karen and Julie are here today to celebrate Justice Countess, along with his son Mike, his daughter Avery, and their wife and mother Amber. Whoops, did I get that right? Okay, I didn't want to mix up Avery and Amber. Karen and Justice Countess' son passed away in 2019. In closing, let me thank Joanne Story, who leads the Appellate Section's History Project that now allows us to know Justice Countess through his recorded words, some that I have quoted here today. Those words came in a fine interview by Justice Murray Cohen, and I'm so grateful that we have that and many other remembrances of him. And other justices, of course. And to the Countess family, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You have allowed me to share my love and my respect for your dad, your husband, your father, your grandfather, and I cannot think of a better honor, like Judge Richmond said. As Heidi said, I did know Dick pretty well in multiple aspects of his life. But not just me. Every lawyer and every judge I know will tell you the same thing about him. Justice Countess was a gentleman. He was a fine advocate. He was a wise judge. And forever, he will be an inspiration. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we have our friend Mike Hatchell, who is going to speak on behalf of Professor Wayne Scott. Mike and Professor Scott first crossed paths as briefing attorneys back at the Texas Supreme Court, and they've remained close friends as well as Supreme Court update partners. So please welcome Mike Hatchell.
Professor Leonard Wayne Scott's induction into the Appellate Hall of Fame is an apt one. His life was one dedicated to the orderly process of civil litigation and to excellence in appellate advocacy. I first met Wayne in August of 1965. He was the outgoing and I was the incoming briefing attorney for Senior Associate Justice Meade Griffin on the Texas Supreme Court. He began his private practice in Waco, doing largely civil litigation. At that time, because we had had a strange and serendipitous connection because of his landlord when he was in Austin, we had become fast and lifelong friends. In private practice, it didn't take very long for the teaching bug to bite him. And he first took a side job, as an adjunct professor at Baylor College of Law. And then in 1971, a few years later, the opportunity to join the faculty at St. Mary's presented itself, and he dedicated himself to academia for the rest of his life. As many would say, the rest is history. He was at St. Mary's for over 50 years, published innumerable articles, taught an amazing variety of classes, although he emphasized civil procedure and appellate advocacy. He coached a winning mock court team, and he founded the school's program for alternate dispute resolution. In fact, the list could go on. But outside the field of law, Wayne's private life was just as exemplary. When he moved to San Antonio, he lost his first wife to a rare disorder, and that left him with 3 teenagers or sub-teens to raise by himself while he was teaching full-time, and usually after midnight, he would read all of the Court of Civil Appeals opinions as part of his duties to edit and publish what was then known as the Texas Civil Digest, a State Bar of Texas publication. I know some examples that anecdotally, Wayne would gather the kids despite this hectic schedule in the evenings, and they would read stories to one another. Needless to say, all these kids have become responsible citizens pursuing a diversity of career paths. When the kids got a little bit more self-sufficient, Wayne told himself one day, I need to get out more. Well, his answer to getting out more was the bane of my childhood, dance lessons. I don't know if Wayne developed much skill at dance, but he did. he did really well at romance because he met, fell in love with, and married his dance instructor. That union was going strong and probably getting stronger after 40 years. Maxine is here with us today, and seated close to her is Wayne's prized teaching assistant during his last year, Stacy Keaton Alexander. And I know this from the many conversations that he had telling me what a great benefit she was to him in his latter years. Wayne in his personal life was no one-trick pony. He was a consummate bibliophile, a book collector, and I spent many hours in bookstores with him. He was an authority on the works of Gladys Tabor and Garland Ruark and juvenile pulp fiction of the kind that was published in series during the 30s, 40s, and 50s. He was also, outside of law, a prodigious writer. He would write on almost anything that captured his fancy, such as biographies of these all but forgotten authors of the pulp fiction series that he admired so much, to local history and places where he'd been, and even to esoteric topics of legal philosophy and trends in the law. For those of you who are devotees of Christopher Guest's Best of Show, you will probably be thrilled to know that Wayne and Maxine were on the dog show circuit. I think Barney should appear behind me in some of the pictures. Barney was a Scottish Terrier. He was a champion, and Wayne and Maxine showed him all across the United States, where he accumulated 90 ribbons. He was one of the top-rated Scottish Terriers in the United States. Wayne's scholarship and dedication is probably no better exemplified than in his devotion to the program called the Texas Supreme Court Update. In the mid-1980s, when MCLE came to fore, he convinced the state bar, of whom he was a part-time employee at the time, that they needed to have an ongoing program that reviewed every Texas Supreme Court case. So he enlisted Rusty McMains as a wild-eyed liberal, and me as a very boring conservative, and him as a neutral arbiter. And that program lives today. It was his baby, and we were loath to make any changes to it. We recorded our 97th episode just 2 weeks ago. I was talking to Wayne 72 hours before he passed away unexpectedly about the program. 2022 had not been kind to him health-wise, and I was trying to convince him that he needed to take a step back on a couple of the episodes, and I got an earful. He said that was not going to happen. He would consider doing that when he got to 100 episodes. And that I should also keep in mind that his preparation for an appearance on the program was therapy for him. Well, I couldn't argue with that. He didn't make 100 shows. He made it into the 90s. And I think Wayne's scholarship, humility, compassion, friendship, loyalty, and the other attributes by which we have known him gives us the license to curve that grade up to 100 and say to him, well done, Professor Scott, a life well lived.
Concludes our program for the Hall of Fame induction. Thank you again to all of our speakers and guests. And let's give one more heartfelt round of applause for the family members of the inductees.